What is up, down, and sideways, all you beautiful individuals? It is yet another rep of League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you fine feathered individuals for a little bit of LCS. Not power rankings, player rankings, which I guess technically is power rankings, but for the players, not teams, individual players as we head into this year. And this might be one of the most difficult years to rank individual players because you've got such a combination of rookies, imports coming over, or just guys on completely new squads with 4 different players around them.
It's kind of fitting. LCS is back, and we're bringing in a bit of the proving grounds type of attitude to this list of player rankings because, a lot of them are simply in situations, whether you are a veteran or a rookie in the LCS, where you're at that point where it's prove that you are ahead of someone else, better rank, higher power, or whatsoever in this type of list right now. Otherwise, at the very beginning of the year, this is how we see things stacked up.
And before we get to the actual list, got to do the check-in for preseason nationalities. Heading into 2026 as we rebrand back to the LCS, we got 16 Korean players and 14 North American. That's 10 American, 4 Canadian players. So yes, more Koreans than North Americans heading into this year, which is, par for the course these days.
Par for the course, but I think at the very least, this is my uneducated, unresearched guess on it, but I think the last time the LCS was around, I don't think we had quite as much North American representation, so you take it. Small little steps, little improvements here or there. That's got to be the LCS way. So I think, checking in on that. Certainly still very much an import-heavy region, but very much so a landscape where we've got our domestic talent to still keep yourself hopeful for.
And when you look on that top side of the map and at the top of that table, it is very import heavy when we're talking about top laners. Bwipo no longer here. He was kind of consensus top 3 towards the tippity top, and despite maybe slightly disappointing bow out at the Kespa Cup, I think individual talent domination wise, you're putting Thanatos in that number 1 spot for Cloud9, and even sliding in Morgan tentatively in that 2 spot, but there's a lot of Koreans when you're talking about the top lane in 2026.
But I think you wouldn't really be a major region around the world at this point if you didn't have some Koreans leading in that top side, in that top lane role especially. A lot of people looking for that standout star type of performance in that solo lane. These type of guys can give you that, right? They can be the type of players that can lead you through, specifically someone like me when I'm looking at the very top of someone like Thanatos. I think that is someone that I think is primed with this Cloud9 roster with some more experience and time in North America under his belt. I want to see him really explode, really become that demon in that top side that we see so many of these Korean top laners become within their regions. I think that this is time for Thanatos to really show some teeth in the LCS.
And it's the opportunity to see there's lots of roles where you're going to see this. What a middle of the pack LCK player does in the LCS. In years past, that's resulted in MVP awards. I'm not going to say Morgan's picking up MVP in his first year with Team Liquid, but I'd be surprised if he wasn't borderline or just minimum top 3 heading into 2026.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple paths that sometimes can play out with an import, and especially someone like Morgan in his specific situation and past history within the LCK, stepping into the LCS. Sometimes you get this, again, where the competition maybe isn't as intense. It isn't as the level of the LCK. You can start to find your own improvements and sharpen yourself already from a point of where you have been at your point in your career. And Morgan, certainly someone that we have seen the ups and downs, but the important part here at the very least on the LCS side, the ups have been there at that type of level. So if you can bring that and you can find that at a more consistent level and that type of impact here in the LCS, then I think this import is certainly worth it.
Biggest question marks and really potential to rise on these rankings are in that middle area when you're talking about both Zamudo and Gakos, who I'm still going to call a rookie, even though he played some games for FlyQuest. And really, I think he's still a little bit more green, not saying that just because he's on FlyQuest, than Zamudo because he's had more time in the tier 2 regions, and combine that with having a guy like Inspired, who at least in the first split, before he maybe gets frustrated, is going to be someone that Zamudo can learn a lot from, and you're going to see, I think, quick growth out of him, maybe even quicker than Gakos, who's on a younger roster.
And this is where you start to understand the proving ground type of situation. This is where you need to prove yourself now at the LCS type of level when we're talking about these players. Because again, yes, having a lot of that excitement, having some potential behind them, you still got to get it done here when we're talking about being on this type of stage. And that's what you're talking about with having them in this type of position on the ranking. But again, a lot of hope, a lot of expectation that I think the next time we're revisiting doing these type of player rankings, whether it's, after the first week, as soon as that, or a couple weeks in, I expect to see these two climbing up in these type of player rankings.
And I know people see an Impact right near the bottom of this board might freak out, but again, I take you back to 2025, where this was not vintage Impact or top of the table in the LCS Impact. It was definitely his worst year since he's joined the LCS, probably, which is crazy because he was MVP in 2024. But I don't know if going on a new team, new scenery, new organization is going to be a resurgent right back to him. As we've talked about before, he's 30 years old. I'm less convinced than I ever have been that he's just immediately going to ascend back to the top.
Yeah, I think it is unlikely for sure, especially when you look at kind of the past type of examples of certain type of situations, a player towards the end of their career making one of these type of moves. Sometimes, again, yes, does re-energize, does remotivate them and refocus their efforts out there on Summoner's Rift, and you do get a better product. I don't think that that's necessarily going to be the case here, what we've got with Impact set up with Sentinels this time around. So again, a very, familiar name, face, and performance that you can hopefully expect from him at this point. But given what we've seen last year, you got to absolutely, lower your expectations when you're talking about Impact at this point.
The easiest check, slam dunk, number one on the list is, of course, when you go to jungle and you're saying, yes, doesn't matter if he's on a new squad, Inspired, no question, is coming in as the top dog jungler heading into 2026. But after that, it gets pretty damn wide open.
Yeah, it really is, and it's about what flavor you're really wanting to go for in the jungle at that point, which again I understand is already quite a personal thing when you're examining what your preferred style is and strategies and aggression as far as how you want to play in League of Legends. But you've got your options here in the LCS at the very least when you're looking outside of Inspired at that very tippity top of that jungle platform. When you're thinking of players like Contracts, you're looking at a guy who certainly is going to need some more of a bounce back. Blabber as well. You're talking about someone that I think is at that very tippity top, but can try to push up towards the level that we have seen Inspired reach in the past couple of years. And then truly, if Cloud9 is going to be back at that top tier level for the region, Blabber's going to have to be back at that top tier level of performance himself in the jungle.
And I think, you're looking at the last year plus body of work. Contracts has been the more consistent jungler, and you combine that with him getting a mega upgrade in the mid lane for Zynie versus Cloud9 getting APA, who I'm not going to say right now is an upgrade over Loki. Means you put Contracts ahead of Blabber on a list like this. Jose Dioto's a guy who could definitely climb to probably that 2 spot right behind Inspired as kind of that peak, and then you get to this younger group. XU, we've seen him shine even on some underwhelming squads, so deserve to put him ahead of these kind of young crew. But Griffin is the guy I'm most excited about seeing on this list to, number one, hit the ground rolling as a shot caller and communicator as a rookie, but showcase why this has been one of the most hyped up NA prospects for like 4 years.
Oh man, this is one of those ones where, again, I hope it ages like milk, having him here in this type of position. It's gotta be one of the ones where you're hoping that he can instantly prove that he is of a higher tier, that you are misrepresenting him here at this type of point. Yes, I think it's one of those ones where it is still cautiously high for him and his expectations where we are at this point, but given what opportunity is there with him for FlyQuest, you absolutely have to be looking at this as one of those guys who can prove and climb very early in the season.
And he's a perfect example of when you do a ranking like this, you're kind of giving a negative grade just for being a rookie because we haven't seen you on this biggest stage. I know he played in the LTA Self last year with Loud, but even guys like XU have, on some not good dog water teams in the LCS, proven that he's a guy who deserves to be a starter. And then, of course, the four ahead of him are very established junglers. So you're kind of working with the handicap just coming in as a rookie, which means when we redo these in split 2 and even one split of experience underneath, you can say, okay, this dude's the real deal.
Yeah, it's a very different situation from that point. But when you are so relatively green at this point in that regard, you do have to caution yourself when you are doing these type of player rankings and do cede to some of that experience. Never mind how strong that experience exactly is. You have to find that type of way through. And I think right now for Griffin, you got to be happy in this type of position. And certainly, again, one of those players that you are very keenly looking in those first couple of weeks, how he's going to be improving and where he is going to find himself positioned on something like this.
Much like Inspire, the top spot in jungle, very easy to lock in Quid as that top dog for mid laners, but I will say, somebody like Zynie can absolutely come for him, test him, push him further than he's been pushed the last at least year and a half, 2 years over in the LCS, and it's no surprise that the whole top half here are the Korean mid laners and the bottom half are those domestic NA players starting with APA in the 5 spot.
It's kind of crazy, but I think it's maybe more so a statement on kind of the general strength and solidarity of the mid lane when you're talking about the LCS, that you have Quid at that very tippity top of that mountain, of that platform, which is unquestioned given what he has shown you the last 2-3 years here in the LCS, his own growth, his own contributions on his squads, and how much they've relied on him. Yes, you can throw him into that tier. And then right after him, it is Zynie, because outside of, kind of similar in the conversations and where he does take a little bit of a hit, just like someone like Griffin, without having that full main stage type of appearances, the LCK Challenger scene is about as main stage as you can get as far as
at least the same level as the CBLOL or LTA South, if not higher.
And he has certainly cleared all the bars of the prove me status at that point in that type of challenge. So to step into the LCS, you do get that type of respect and do get that little bit of a benefit to buddy up right behind what is Quid. And the fact that someone like Zynie can step in with that level of prove me accreditation to throw into this type of tier says everything else about the rest of the mid lane category here in the LCS. That doesn't mean that there still aren't some diamonds in the rough to find through, but absolutely it's going to be diamond mining in the rough if you're looking through the mid lane field.
And, I mean, we saw nobody gets more visibly tilted on their player camp than APA. We already saw it at the Kespa Cup this year, but if things go right, how high do you think APA can actually be regarded? Can he get back to vying for top 3, maybe even top 2?
If this is a Cloud9 team that is playing at the top of the LCS, that this is an APA that is able to expand his champion pool, yes, I think that is the APA that we are talking about. Early indications from the Kespa Cup. Again, not a lot of really solid ground to go off of, but
Mel is not being added to his champion pool.
I don't want to see that, yes. But I think that, again, it's one of those ones where if those steps are seen, yeah, you can have that conversation about APA, but right now it certainly is in that territory where he has been knocked down as far as the prestige and power of where you would expect him to be, and where we had hoped him to be at this point.
I would have almost been more excited about a guy like Darkwings joining Cloud9 and being, he's an older rookie. I think he's like 23 and has been around the challenger scene for a while, and we saw positive growth out of him on Disguise last year, but being surrounded by veterans, and he will be surrounded by veterans, even though they're maybe on the more washed up side of things. But I feel like the potential is more unknown for him than APA at this point, so wouldn't be surprised if Split 2 rolls around and we have Darkwings being coveted a little bit higher than Mr. APA. We roll on to the bot lane, and AD carries maybe the role where you're most excited, or at least where I'm most excited about to see the combination of young talent and, emerging talent, and that starts at the top of the table. It was less than, like 2 years ago that guys like Jan and, I mean, Masu was barely even around. We were just talking about the potential, but now we have a full year and a half where they have been the consensus best 2 AD carries in the LCS, and that should hold true again for 2026.
And it's about time that it's really now the screws are tightening down and saying, all right, you've gone through this growth period. We've seen that you can handle it and you've leveled up. Now can you give us the superstar mode? Can you give us the sports car drive through the hills and canyons all the way to an LCS championship? That's absolutely what you're talking about when you're looking at guys like Jan, like Masu for this TL and FlyQuest iterations. Yes, you're banking that they can be that superstar engine to drive you, that damage that you always will need in the team fights to get you through. Both of them have shown that they have been able to do that. Both of them have leveled up and gained their experience on the international stage as well. No question that they are at the top of that ADC mountain when we are looking at the LCS.
And will be, I mean, maybe Jan less so now that Quid's there, but featured guys where comps are being built around them, play styles are being developed around them. We saw that Jan was the only bright spot at times for Team Liquid last year, but a full revamp should shore up some of those issues as the LCK Team Liquid version shows up. But Masu obviously stepping into that more veteran role, as we've alluded to many times. And then behind them, B-Boy, one of the most criminally underrated players in the LCS. And I think Shopify as a whole is the most underrated squad in the LCS heading into next year.
And I don't know what it's going to take, because if it wasn't any of the efforts that you saw last year, and especially how vital his efforts were to anything positive for Shopify Rebellion, I don't see how anyone can be underestimating or downgrading what you are going to be getting or what you could see from B-Boy at this point in the LCS. He's got to be at least respected in this type of point. Again, where we're outside of talking about players where it is, again, putting the full screw down and saying, all right, let's see superstar mode. Let's see it really taken to that next level. Someone like B-Boy, you're absolutely maybe making some of those type of requests, not to the same type of degree, but you can at very least feel safe and should know your expected level of performance is going to be that upper echelon of what you have in the LCS at this point. B-Boy has certainly proven that to this point in his career.
And the superstar level for AD carries kind of ends around Berserker, and he's the big question mark because, again, is it DN Freak's Berserker or is it Cloud9 MVP Berserker that we're getting? Was the home cooking not the secret sauce, or is the LA Sunshine what this man was missing to really thrive?
I'm thinking, it must be something like when he got to Cloud9, he got the most luxurious bed for North America. And when he went home, yeah, it's your home bed. It's your bed you've been in all the time. But it doesn't quite, curve and comfort right around.
Didn't have the Tempur-Pedic mattress topper on top.
Yeah. So that's my copium take here on the type of performance for Berserker. And yes, that we will be getting LCS Berserker back, because that would be a big boon to this ADC, to this bottom lane ranking position type of thing. If Berserker is able to show up and be the Berserker that was the unquestioned #1 in this position last time he was here, that would be absolutely a big shakeup and a good shakeup for the bot lane rankings.
Lastly, we get to support, and I'm going to say it. With Bucio departing, this might be the weakest support pool that I can remember in recent memory within the LCS, because having Vulcan and Core JJ at the top of the table, this ain't 2021. These guys aren't by no means at their peak levels, and they're still here at the top because there's just not that much other talent. I'm really banking on Cryogen kind of ascending to the top of this table to push everybody else.
Well, I'm viewing it as the shark has left the ocean, and at this point you're trying to figure out what is the food chain, right? Because there is established players here in the LCS that you can go through, right? Our veterans that you are looking at. Core JJ, Vulcan, of course, these are certainly names that you are very familiar with and can hopefully expect a familiar level of performance type of thing from. But there absolutely can be a hope that someone else, one of these other fishes in the pond, can level up, can eat enough and move their way up the food chain to be a bigger name, to become the shark that has left the scene in Bucio.
Again, throwing in other veterans like Huki and Ignar, like It's 2026, man. This isn't 2020, 2023 even, where you're hyped up about these guys being the shot callers, the veteran presence, the guys that you're looking to for the engages. It's on the other side of the hill. And even, when you're talking about guys like Seos and Leones, who came over last year with the merger, and they played well, but again, you're not saying like this is a support that you're excited to see match up internationally or anything.
As you get lower down, yeah, it is harder to find that type of optimism that you are going to see someone usurp, someone take over and start climbing up as far as how you're reviewing them within the position in the region. But I certainly think that, again, it's one of those ones where you can go through it again. You have the very top, and then you go to that bottom of this type of list, and you can see where I think you probably don't really have a lot of chances or expectations on any type of reinvention, rechanging of how you view these players and what type of things that you can get from them in a contribution. But I think in kind of the middle tier still, there is maybe some of that hope. When you are talking about players like Cryogen, looking at Seos, and you're hoping that they can find a way to level up, to take over in what is going to be that power ranking vacuum left over from Busio leaving the region.
Yeah, Cryogen's the main guy I've got hope and expectation for, even though he is a young rookie. And then you got to talk about Isles as well, who's been around for several years, has shown glimpses, has been on some subpar teams, but now this is his best opportunity with a guy like Berserker with Inspired on a seemingly solid Lion Gaming roster that this is kind of the make or break split or year for him.
Yeah, it absolutely has to be that make or break one because, again, we have seen little bits, sprinklings here or there of that potential, of that talent that could be one of those ones that takes it to the top of his own position. But you still haven't seen enough of it, never that consistency or never in the right situation, as you said. So seeing it this time around where everything seems lined up alongside you, yeah, you got to deliver. You got to hope that it is this one this time around. And again, I feel like out of a weak position when you're looking at the rest of the LCS, when you're talking about the support role, again, my hope, my optimism is that someone is going to emerge out of this one in a stronger position than expected, given that there is going to be that availability, that vacuum with Busio not here dominating.
And we'll eat our words if we get a turn back the clock type of performance from some of these veterans. But for now, I don't think either of us are buying it. But that is it today for Liga Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you, absolute stunners. Thanks for hanging out. We will catch you on that flippity flip.